We haven't eaten in 5 days, the Black Widow whispered through cracked lips as dust devils swirled around their broken wagon. Her trembling son collapsed against splintered wood while vultures circled overhead. Passing travelers averted their eyes from another frontier tragedy, muttering that such women always perish in the wasteland, nameless casualties destined for unmarked graves. The mountain man discovered them during his boundary patrol, a weathered rancher whose reputation for solitude preceded him like shadow. His calloused hands offered bread, but his calculating gaze suggested deeper currents beneath the simple act of mercy. Hidden in her desperate flight lay secrets that could topple the territory's most powerful men, while his isolated ranch harbored the perfect sanctuary, or the perfect trap. Their collision of fates would either forge an alliance capable of exposing systematic corruption or destroy them both. Will his instinct for self-preservation overcome his unexpected protective urges when the true scope of danger reveals itself? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The wagon wheel snapped like a gunshot across the Texas panhandle. Ophelia Grant clutched the reins as their makeshift home lurched sideways into the dust. Her 7-year-old son Eli tumbled against the wooden side, too weak to cry out. 3 weeks of running had stripped them to bone and determination. The last of their bread had gone stale 2 days ago. Water remained precious in the cracked canteen. Ophelia pressed her worn leather satchel closer to her chest. Everything depended on keeping it safe. Everything depended on staying ahead of Elias Roxton. The memory burned fresh. Her brother-in-law standing in their Missouri parlor, his banker's smile cold as winter iron. His words echoed in the wind now. The boy belongs with family, Ophelia. Real family. She had seen the hunger in Roxton's eyes. Not for Eli's well-being, for control. For the inheritance her late husband had left behind. For secrets Roxton believed were buried with the dead. Thunder rolled across the prairie without clouds. Dust devils spiraled in the distance like dancing ghosts. Eli's breathing grew shallow against her shoulder. They could not stay here, but the wagon would not move. Ophelia climbed down and examined the splintered wheel. The wooden spokes had cracked beyond repair. No tools could fix this destruction. No prayers could resurrect what the frontier had claimed. She returned to Eli and lifted him from the wagon bed. His fever had worsened through the afternoon. His skin burned like heated metal. "Mama, I'm thirsty." She gave him the last sip from their canteen. The empty container mocked their situation with hollow silence. Wind picked up across the endless grassland. No trees offered shelter. No buildings broke the horizon. They had chosen this desolate route to avoid towns where Roxton might have eyes and ears. Now isolation would kill them. Ophelia spread their thin blanket beside the broken wagon. She settled Eli in whatever shade the tilted vehicle provided. His eyes had grown glassy with exhaustion. The sun began its descent toward the western horizon. Soon, darkness would bring cold. Soon their situation would become impossible. She opened the leather satchel and stared at its contents. Documents that could change everything. Evidence that powerful men would kill to possess or destroy. Her husband had died protecting these papers. She would not let his sacrifice become meaningless. But what good were secrets if Eli perished in this wasteland? Hours crawled past like wounded animals. Eli's fever climbed higher. Ophelia rationed their hope in smaller and smaller portions. A sound reached them across the prairie. Hoofbeats, steady and purposeful. Ophelia's heart hammered against her ribs. Had Roxton found them already? Had his hired men tracked them to this godforsaken place? She closed the satchel and pushed it beneath the blanket. If death came riding, she would meet it standing. The rider appeared as a dark silhouette against the dying light. Large man on a larger horse. He approached with the caution of someone who had survived by reading danger in strangers. Drury Calder reined his mount 20 feet from their makeshift camp. His weathered face showed neither kindness nor cruelty, only assessment. "Wagon trouble?" His voice carried the roughness of a man who spoke more to cattle than people. Ophelia studied his worn clothes and practical gear. A rancher, probably local, possibly trustworthy. The wheel broke. We're stranded. Drury dismounted and examined their situation with experienced eyes. The broken wagon, the sick child, the desperate woman clutching secrets. He reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a cloth bundle. Inside lay the remains of his day's provisions, hardtack biscuits and dried meat. Enough for one man's dinner. We haven't eaten in 5 days, Ophelia whispered. The words escaped before pride could stop them. Raw truth stripped of pretense, a mother's admission that she had failed to provide for her child. Drury handed her the entire bundle without hesitation. Eli stirred at the sound of voices. His eyes opened enough to focus on the stranger. No fear showed in his gaze. Children possessed instincts that adults often lost. The boy needs shelter, medicine. My ranch is 6 miles north. Ophelia's mind raced through possibilities. Trust meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant death if she chose wrong. But staying here guaranteed death for certain. I don't know you. You don't have options. Truth cut through her hesitation like a blade through silk. Eli's breathing had grown more labored. His fever was climbing toward dangerous territory. Drury lifted Eli onto his horse with surprising gentleness. The boy's small form seemed lost against the animal's broad back. Ophelia gathered their few possessions and the precious satchel. "Can you walk 6 miles?" She nodded. Walking was nothing compared to the distance they had already traveled. Walking was nothing compared to what waited behind them. They started north as darkness claimed the prairie. Drury led his horse at a pace Ophelia could match. He spoke little but watched everything. A man accustomed to solitude and suspicious of change. The ranch house emerged from the night like salvation made of wood and stone, small but solid, clean but spare, the home of a man who needed little and trusted less. Drury carried Eli inside and placed him on a narrow bed. The boy's eyes fluttered but did not open. His breathing remained shallow and quick. "There's a doctor in town, 20 miles east." Ophelia felt the weight of distance like stones in her chest. 20 miles might as well be 20,000, not with Roxton's men possibly watching the towns. She looked around the simple room, one man's refuge from the world, now invaded by strangers carrying trouble like plague. "Why are you helping us?" Drury studied her face in the lamplight. Whatever he saw there satisfied some internal measure. Everyone deserves a chance. Eli's fever broke on the 3rd morning. Color returned to his cheeks like sunrise after endless night. Drury had tended the boy with patience that surprised Ophelia. The gruff rancher possessed gentle hands when circumstances demanded. Ophelia insisted on earning their keep. Pride would not allow charity beyond survival. She cooked their meals and mended torn clothes. She cleaned the modest house with methodical precision. Drury's ranch showed signs of hard work and harder luck. Cattle grazed on decent pasture. Fences stood straight and strong, but the business side crumbled like old paper. His ledger books lay scattered across the kitchen table. Numbers wandered across pages without purpose or plan. Addition errors plagued every column. His record-keeping would shame a schoolchild. "I'm not good with figures," Drury admitted one evening. "Never had the learning for it." Ophelia glanced at the mess of calculations. Her fingers itched to organize the chaos. Years of managing her husband's shipping investments had trained her eyes to spot inefficiencies instantly. She caught herself before speaking. Women did not discuss business matters. Women did not correct men's arithmetic. Women certainly did not reveal knowledge that society deemed unnatural. But the errors glared like beacon fires. Drury was losing money on profitable cattle sales. His pricing strategies ignored market fluctuations. He sold low when he should have held inventory. "You mentioned losing $300 on the Henderson sale." "That's right. Bad timing with the market." Ophelia studied the figures again. Henderson had paid fair price for premium cattle. The loss came from Drury's miscalculated costs and poor timing of feed purchases. "May I see the Henderson contract?" Drury handed over the paperwork with curious expression. Ophelia spread the documents across the table. Her mind processed numbers with mechanical efficiency. "You didn't lose money on this sale. You made $140 profit. That can't be right. Your feed costs were calculated wrong. You bought hay at summer prices but recorded winter rates. The transportation fees were counted twice. The Henderson sale was actually your most profitable transaction this year. Silence filled the kitchen like smoke from a dying fire. Drury stared at the corrected figures. His weathered face showed confusion mixed with wonder. How do you know all this? The question hung between them like a loaded rifle. Ophelia felt the weight of revelation pressing against her chest. Truth demanded courage she was not sure she possessed. I manage my husband's business interests, shipping investments mostly, financial planning and market analysis. You ran a shipping company? I ran everything. James was the public face because the law required it, but I made every major decision for 8 years. The confession tasted like copper in her mouth. She had never spoken these words aloud, not to family, not to friends, certainly not to strangers who might judge her presumptuous. Drury examined the corrected ledgers with growing amazement. Profit margins emerged from chaos. Clear patterns replaced random guesswork. His ranch's true financial picture revealed itself for the first time. You could fix all of this? I could organize your records, identify profitable opportunities, plan seasonal purchases to maximize savings, analyze territorial land prices for expansion possibilities. But you're a woman. The words carried no malice, only confusion about how the world was supposed to work. Ophelia had heard similar statements countless times, society's limitations expressed as natural law. I am a woman who understands numbers better than most men. Over the following days, their secret collaboration began. Ophelia worked on Drury's accounts while he tended cattle. She reorganized 8 years of chaotic record-keeping into coherent systems. The ranch's potential staggered her. Drury owned prime grazing land in a territory hungry for beef. His cattle bloodlines produced superior stock. His reputation for honest dealing had earned respect from neighboring ranchers. But his business practices belonged in the previous century. Ophelia identified opportunities that could triple his annual profits: strategic land purchases, improved breeding programs, coordinated sales timing to capture peak market prices, partnership arrangements with smaller ranchers who needed guidance. She drafted detailed plans while maintaining careful discretion. A woman's business knowledge was considered unnatural at best, scandalous at worst. Society would question her moral character if her activities became public knowledge. Eli flourished in the stable environment. He followed Drury around the ranch like an eager apprentice. The boys' laughter returned gradually, replacing the fearful silence that had marked their desperate flight. Mr. Drury, can I help feed the horses? Drury showed infinite patience with childish questions. His loneliness had carved deep channels that Eli's presence began to fill. The solitary rancher discovered unexpected joy in teaching small hands to properly curry horses. Romance bloomed between Ophelia and Drury with the slow inevitability of changing seasons. Their partnership transcended necessity and grew into something resembling affection. Mutual respect formed the foundation. Shared purpose built the structure above. But shadows lengthened across their temporary peace. News arrived with a traveling merchant who stopped to water his horses. A well-dressed banker from Missouri was making inquiries in the nearest towns, asking about a widow and her young son, offering rewards for information about their whereabouts. Elias Roxton had found their trail. That evening, Ophelia revealed more of their story, her husband's suspicious death, Roxton's attempts to claim guardianship of Eli, the desperate flight across 3 states to escape his reach. She did not mention the leather satchel or its contents. Some secrets carried too much weight for sharing. He has legal documents, financial resources, political connections. Men like Roxton always win against women like me. Drury's jaw tightened with resolve she had not expected. The solitary rancher who avoided entanglements was choosing sides. Not always. Not here. But Ophelia knew better. The frontier was no refuge from civilized corruption. Money and influence traveled faster than desperate mothers fleeing with their children. Their sanctuary was about to become a battleground. Their secret partnership transformed Drury's struggling ranch into a profitable enterprise within weeks. Ophelia worked by lamplight after Eli slept, reorganizing years of financial chaos into systematic order. Her calculations revealed opportunities that multiplied income while reducing waste. Drury served as the public face of every decision. Territorial law prevented women from conducting business independently. Society deemed such activities unwomanly and morally suspicious. But behind closed doors, Ophelia orchestrated every strategic move. She identified undervalued land parcels ripe for purchase, analyzed seasonal market fluctuations to optimize cattle sales, negotiated feed contracts that cut costs by 30%. Her shipping experience translated perfectly to livestock transportation logistics. The results spoke louder than convention. Neighboring ranchers noticed Drury's sudden business acumen. His operation ran with efficiency that bordered on miraculous. Cattle sales generated profits that exceeded industry standards. Word spread through the territory like wildfire. The solitary rancher had somehow transformed into a strategic genius overnight. Men who had ignored him for years now sought his advice on financial matters. Drury deflected their curiosity with characteristic silence. He accepted credit for decisions while privately marveling at Ophelia's brilliance. Their collaboration felt like discovering hidden treasure in familiar ground. Eli blossomed under the stable routine. The frightened boy who had collapsed beside a broken wagon now helped with daily chores. He fed chickens with careful precision, learned to brush horses without startling them, called Drury by name instead of fearful whispers. The child's transformation revealed the depth of trauma their flight had caused. Weeks of uncertainty had taught him to expect abandonment. But Drury's patient presence slowly rebuilt his capacity for trust. "Mr. Drury, will we stay here forever?" The innocent question carried weight that staggered both adults. Forever implied permanence that none of them dared assume. Roxton's pursuit made every day borrowed time. Romance grew between Ophelia and Drury with the natural pace of seasonal change. Their intellectual partnership created intimacy deeper than physical attraction. Mutual respect formed the foundation for something approaching love. She watched him teach Eli to mend fences with infinite patience. He observed her brilliant mind solve problems that had frustrated him for years. Their connection transcended necessity and became genuine affection. But Drury carried scars from his past that influenced every relationship. The cholera outbreak had claimed his wife and infant daughter 7 years earlier. Their deaths had driven him to this isolated ranch where grief could heal without interference. He had built walls around his heart with the same methodical care he used for cattle fences. Ophelia and Eli were slowly dismantling those barriers through simple presence and shared purpose. The process terrified him more than any frontier danger. Their success attracted attention beyond neighboring ranchers. Territorial officials took notice of the dramatic improvements to Drury's operation. His ranch became a model that others sought to emulate. Local merchants benefited from his increased business volume. The general store owner praised Drury's prompt payments and steady orders. The blacksmith appreciated his planned equipment maintenance rather than emergency repairs. Economic ripple effects spread throughout the region. Drury's prosperity lifted the entire community's fortunes. But visibility carried risks that isolation had previously avoided. Ophelia worked to minimize her exposure while maximizing their strategic advantages. She studied territorial land laws with the intensity of a legal scholar. Her husband's business connections had taught her the importance of understanding regulatory frameworks. The knowledge proved invaluable. She identified legal loopholes that protected their growing property holdings, structured their expansion to minimize tax burdens, created partnership agreements that shared profits while limiting liability. Her financial expertise extended far beyond basic bookkeeping. Years of managing complex shipping investments had honed skills that most territorial businessmen lacked entirely. She understood market dynamics that transcended regional boundaries, but danger approached with the relentless pace of approaching storm clouds. Reports reached them of Roxton's systematic search through Missouri river towns. He was following their trail with the persistence of a professional tracker. The banker had resources that dwarfed anything they could marshal in defense. Political connections reached into territorial government. Financial influence extended across multiple states. Legal authority backed by federal recognition. Worse, Ophelia began recognizing disturbing patterns in territorial land records. Families losing ranches under questionable circumstances. Foreclosures that followed suspicious timelines. Documentation that raised more questions than it answered. Her trained eye spotted irregularities that suggested systematic manipulation. Someone was orchestrating land seizures through fraudulent legal processes. The scope appeared massive and carefully coordinated. The revelation chilled her more than personal danger. If Roxton possessed this level of criminal organization, their individual flight meant nothing. They had stumbled into a web of corruption that stretched across the entire territory. She shared her suspicions with Drury during one of their late-night planning sessions. His face darkened as the implications became clear. They were not just hiding from one vengeful man. They had discovered evidence of territorial-wide fraud. How many families lost their land? Ophelia consulted her careful notes. She had been tracking the patterns for weeks, building a comprehensive picture of systematic theft. At least 17 ranches in the past 2 years, maybe more that I haven't found yet. The numbers represented dreams destroyed and families displaced. Children forced to abandon homes their parents had built through decades of hard work. Communities scattered by legal theft disguised as legitimate business. Their personal crisis had revealed institutional corruption that demanded justice. But fighting such powerful forces required resources and allies they did not possess. 2 fugitives and a child could not challenge an entire criminal network. Yet the evidence demanded action. Staying silent meant complicity in ongoing theft. Speaking out meant certain destruction at Roxton's hands. They faced an impossible choice between conscience and survival. The leather satchel hidden beneath their bed contained secrets that could change everything, but revealing its contents would transform them from hidden victims to primary targets. Time was running out to make that terrible decision. Elias Roxton arrived in town on a Tuesday morning with the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. His expensive suit and polished boots marked him as Eastern money in a territory that respected such displays of wealth. The leather portfolio under his arm contained official documents that carried legal weight. Sheriff Marcus Webb studied the papers with appropriate gravity. Guardianship claims supported by Missouri court orders. Financial statements proving Roxton's ability to provide for the child. Character references from prominent businessmen vouching for his moral standing. "The widow is unstable," Roxton explained with practiced concern. "She fled Missouri with my nephew after suffering a mental breakdown following her husband's death. The boy needs proper care from legitimate family." Webb nodded at the familiar story. The frontier attracted desperate women who often made poor decisions under emotional duress. His job involved returning such situations to proper legal authority. Where might I find this woman and the child? I have reliable information they're staying at the Calder Ranch north of town. The rancher may not understand he's harboring fugitives. Roxton's tone suggested generous interpretation of Drury's potential involvement. A reasonable man offering benefit of doubt to ignorant locals who meant no harm. The performance convinced Webb of his sincerity and legitimate authority. News of the sheriff's intended visit reached Drury through the blacksmith whose brother worked at the jail. Small towns thrived on information that traveled faster than official notices. Warning arrived 2 hours before Webb planned to ride north. Ophelia received the news with the calm resignation of someone who had expected this moment for weeks. Her hands remained steady as she packed their meager belongings into traveling bags. Flight had become routine through months of practice. "We can't keep running forever," Drury said quietly. "We can try." But Eli's reaction destroyed any possibility of further escape. The boy clung to Drury's legs with desperate strength, tears streaming down his face at the prospect of leaving the only stable home he remembered. "Please don't make me go. I want to stay here. I want to stay with you." The child's anguish cut through adult calculations like a knife through paper. He had found safety and affection in this remote ranch. Abandoning it meant returning to uncertainty and fear that had nearly killed him. Drury knelt to meet Eli's eyes with gentle firmness. The solitary rancher had discovered paternal instincts he never knew existed. 3 months of caring for the boy had awakened protective urges stronger than self-preservation. Nobody's taking you anywhere you don't want to go. The promise carried weight that transformed their situation from retreat to confrontation. Drury was choosing sides against legal authority and potential federal intervention. His isolated refuge would become a battleground. Sheriff Webb arrived with 2 deputies and official paperwork that should have settled the matter quickly. But he found unexpected resistance from a community that had benefited from the Calder Ranch's recent prosperity. Neighboring ranchers gathered to witness the proceedings. Their presence was not accidental. Word had spread through informal networks about Roxton's claims and Webb's intended action. Local opinion mattered in territorial disputes. Frank Henderson spoke for the group with quiet authority. His ranch bordered Drury's property, and their business relationship had proven mutually profitable. Recent improvements to both operations had strengthened community ties. Drury Calder is a good neighbor and honest man. The widow has caused no trouble here. The boy is healthy and well cared for. Maybe Missouri business should stay in Missouri. Webb found himself facing united local sentiment that complicated his straightforward legal mission. Territorial law required balancing federal authority with community standards. Popular opinion influenced judicial decisions more than Eastern officials preferred to acknowledge. Roxton maintained his concerned relative performance but showed flashes of impatience with frontier customs that delayed his obvious legal rights. His condescending attitude toward local intelligence began irritating men who prided themselves on practical wisdom. These people don't understand the complexity of legal guardianship. I have court orders that supersede local preferences. The comment revealed arrogance that undermined his careful diplomatic approach. Western communities resented Eastern assumptions about their sophistication and judgment. Roxton's mask was slipping at precisely the wrong moment. Ophelia appeared in the ranch house doorway with Eli beside her. 3 months of stability had transformed them both from desperate fugitives into confident residents. Their integration into local society was evident to everyone present, but legal documents trumped community acceptance. Webb had sworn duty to enforce territorial law regardless of personal preferences. Federal authority could not yield to local sentiment without undermining the entire judicial system. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me to town for legal proceedings. Mr. Roxton has valid guardianship papers for the boy." "The boy stays here," Drury said firmly. The challenge hung in the afternoon air like gunpowder smoke. Sheriff Webb faced a situation that could escalate beyond his ability to control peacefully. Armed confrontations served nobody's interests but seemed increasingly inevitable. Roxton sensed victory within his grasp and pressed his advantage with renewed legal authority. He produced additional documents that expanded his claims beyond simple guardianship to include recovery of stolen property and financial assets. The widow fled Missouri with items belonging to her late husband's estate. "I'm legally appointed executor with authority to recover all materials in her possession." The leather satchel suddenly became central to their confrontation. Ophelia's protective grip on the worn container intensified as Roxton's true priorities became clear. His pursuit had never been about Eli's welfare alone. Community support began wavering as the complexity of legal claims exceeded local understanding. Interstate property disputes and estate law involved federal jurisdiction that transcended territorial autonomy. Local opinion could not override such formal authority. But Drury stepped forward with determination that surprised everyone, including himself. The solitary rancher who had avoided entanglements for 7 years was choosing battle against impossible odds. "This is my land. They're under my protection. Anyone who wants them goes through me first." The standoff stretched through tense minutes that felt like hours. Sheriff Webb faced a decision that would define his reputation and possibly his career. Drury's challenge carried the backing of influential neighbors whose support mattered in territorial politics. Roxton's patience finally cracked under the pressure of unexpected resistance. His carefully constructed facade of concerned relative crumbled as frustrated anger replaced diplomatic charm. The transformation revealed the calculating banker beneath the caring family member. "This is ridiculous. I have legal authority here. These frontier people don't understand proper law." His condescending tone completed the destruction of local goodwill. Western communities tolerated many things, but not Eastern arrogance that dismissed their intelligence and judgment. Roxton had just unified opposition against himself. Frank Henderson stepped closer to Drury in a show of solidarity that other ranchers quickly joined. Their collective presence sent clear message about community loyalties and territorial independence from outside interference. But legal documents still carried federal weight that local opinion could not overturn. Webb remained bound by sworn duty despite personal preferences that increasingly favored Drury's position in the dispute. Ophelia watched the confrontation with growing certainty that half-truths would no longer suffice. The leather satchel pressed against her ribs like burning coal. Its contents held power to transform this struggle from personal dispute to territorial crisis. The moment of revelation had arrived, whether she was prepared or not. "Sheriff Webb, may I speak privately with you about the true nature of Mr. Roxton's business in this territory?" Her formal tone commanded attention that surprised everyone present. The desperate widow was addressing legal authority with confidence that suggested knowledge rather than pleading. Roxton's face showed the first hint of genuine alarm. "Anything you need to say can be said publicly, ma'am." Ophelia nodded and reached for the satchel with steady hands. 3 months of safety had restored her courage and sense of justice. The time for hiding was over. Then the community should hear about the systematic theft of territorial land through fraudulent legal documents. She opened the worn leather container and withdrew official papers that made Roxton step backward as if struck. His confident demeanor collapsed into panic as he recognized documents he had believed were safely buried with their original owner. "These are original territorial land grant records maintained by my late husband in his capacity as land commissioner. They document fraudulent mortgage applications, forged ownership transfers, and illegal foreclosure proceedings orchestrated by Mr. Roxton's banking network." Sheriff Webb examined the first document with growing amazement. Official territorial seals verified authenticity that could not be questioned. The paper trail revealed systematic corruption spanning multiple counties and affecting dozens of families. Neighboring ranchers crowded closer to hear evidence that explained recent mysterious land seizures in surrounding areas. Several men recognized property descriptions of ranches that had been lost under questionable legal circumstances. The Henderson Ranch foreclosure was based on falsified mortgage documents. The Morrison family lost their land through forged ownership papers. At least 17 properties were stolen using illegal legal processes coordinated through Mr. A. Roxton's Missouri banking connections. Each revelation struck the gathered community like physical blows. These men knew the affected families personally. They had witnessed honest people lose everything through legal proceedings that had seemed legitimate at the time. Roxton attempted damage control through aggressive intimidation that revealed his true character completely. The concerned relative mask was abandoned in favor of naked threats against anyone who supported fraudulent accusations. Those documents were stolen property. This woman is a criminal who fled lawful authority. Her word carries no legal weight against legitimate business transactions. But the evidence spoke with authority that transcended personal credibility. Official seals and documented fraud patterns created irrefutable proof of systematic criminal activity. Territory law recognized such documentation regardless of who presented it. Webb found himself holding evidence of the largest corruption scandal in territorial history. The implications extended far beyond simple guardianship disputes into federal criminal territory that demanded immediate investigation. "Ma'am, you're saying your husband documented this criminal activity before his death?" He discovered the pattern and began collecting evidence. Mr. Roxton learned about his investigation and arranged his murder to silence him before he could expose the full scope of the fraud. The accusation hit like thunder across clear sky. Murder transformed property crime into capital offense that carried federal jurisdiction and potential execution. The stakes had escalated beyond anyone's expectations. Roxton's panic became obvious to everyone present. His threats intensified into desperate attempts to discredit evidence that could destroy his entire criminal enterprise and possibly cost him his life. She's insane with grief. These are fabricated documents designed to support her delusions about her husband's death. No court will accept such obvious forgeries. But Frank Henderson had recognized several property descriptions from personal knowledge of recent foreclosures. The documented fraud matched patterns that local residents had witnessed but lacked authority to challenge effectively. Sheriff, the Morrison place was lost exactly like these papers describe. Same with the Creek Valley Ranch and the Thompson spread. This evidence matches what we've been seeing for 2 years. Community testimony corroborated documentary evidence with personal experience that carried significant legal weight. Webb faced undeniable proof of territorial crime that demanded immediate federal intervention. Eli stepped forward with unexpected courage that surprised every adult present. The frightened boy had been listening carefully to conversations that revealed the truth about their desperate flight from Missouri. He came into my room at night back home. Mama made us leave because she was scared he would hurt me. The child's innocent words revealed the personal dimension of Roxton's criminal character. Sexual threat against children elevated his crimes to the most serious level that territorial law recognized. The gathered community reacted with the righteous anger that such accusations generated among frontier families. Child protection transcended all other considerations in communities where family safety represented civilization's foundation. Sheriff Webb faced clear duty that eliminated any remaining ambiguity about proper legal action. Federal crimes demanded federal response, regardless of local preferences or political complications. Mr. Roxton, you're under arrest pending territorial investigation of these charges. The territorial courthouse filled beyond capacity for the hearing that would determine the fate of 17 stolen ranches. Judge Samuel Morrison had traveled from the territorial capital specifically to oversee proceedings that could reshape land ownership across 3 counties. Ophelia sat beside Drury at the plaintiff's table, her documents organized with methodical precision. 3 months of analyzing territorial records had prepared her for this moment. The leather satchel that had protected these secrets now rested empty, its contents finally serving their intended purpose. Roxton appeared with 2 lawyers imported from St. Louis, their expensive suits and legal credentials intended to intimidate frontier justice. But territorial law operated by different rules than Eastern courtrooms. Evidence mattered more than presentation. Judge Morrison examined each document with careful attention to detail that impressed even skeptical observers. Official territorial seals verified authenticity beyond reasonable dispute. The paper trail revealed systematic fraud that staggered in scope and audacity. Mrs. Grant, please explain how you obtained these territorial land commission records. Ophelia stood with dignity that commanded courtroom attention. She had prepared for this moment through weeks of careful planning. Her presentation would determine justice for dozens of families. My late husband served as territorial land commissioner before his death. He discovered irregularities in mortgage applications and foreclosure proceedings that suggested coordinated fraud. He began documenting evidence systematically before Mr. Roxton arranged his murder. The murder accusation sent whispers through the packed courtroom. Several affected families had traveled hundreds of miles to witness proceedings that could restore their stolen property. Their presence added moral weight to legal arguments. Roxton's lead attorney objected to unproven accusations that exceeded the scope of property disputes. But Judge Morrison allowed testimony that established motive for document theft and systematic cover-up attempts. Frank Henderson testified about foreclosure proceedings that had seemed questionable at the time, but were accepted due to official documentation. His detailed knowledge of affected properties corroborated evidence patterns that Ophelia had identified. Other ranchers provided similar testimony about neighbors who had lost land through legal processes that followed suspicious timelines. The community impact became clear as family after family described dreams destroyed by fraudulent foreclosures. Eli's testimony proved most powerful despite his young age. The boy described Roxton's threatening behavior in Missouri and the fear that had driven their desperate flight. His innocent words carried emotional impact that legal arguments could not match. He scared Mama. She said we had to leave so he couldn't hurt us anymore. The child's simple honesty resonated with territorial families who understood the sacred nature of protecting children from predators. Roxton's attempts to claim guardianship now appeared as calculated moves to silence witnesses. Judge Morrison called for recess to study evidence in detail. The sheer volume of documented fraud required careful analysis to determine appropriate legal remedies. 17 families waited for justice that had been delayed too long. During the break, affected families approached Ophelia with gratitude that embarrassed her humble nature. She had risked everything to expose corruption that had destroyed their lives. Her courage enabled their hope for restoration. "We thought we were alone against the system. You showed us we could fight back." But Ophelia deflected praise toward community solidarity that had made victory possible. Individual courage meant nothing without collective support from neighbors who chose justice over convenience. When court resumed, Judge Morrison delivered rulings that would reshape territorial land ownership. Every fraudulent foreclosure was reversed. All illegal property transfers were declared void. Affected families would reclaim their stolen ranches. The evidence presented demonstrates systematic criminal fraud designed to steal land through corrupted legal processes. These crimes demand federal prosecution and complete restitution to affected parties. Roxton received sentences for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder that would confine him to federal prison for the remainder of his natural life. His banking network faced dissolution and criminal prosecution throughout Missouri and territorial jurisdictions. The legal victory restored 17 families to their ancestral lands, but the personal victory meant more to Ophelia. She had honored her husband's sacrifice by completing his mission to expose territorial corruption. That evening, Judge Morrison performed a wedding ceremony in the courthouse chapel. Drury and Ophelia exchanged vows before witnesses who had supported their struggle against impossible odds. Eli served as ring-bearer with obvious joy. After the ceremony, Drury knelt before Eli with formal request that touched everyone present. The solitary rancher was asking permission to become the father that the boy desperately needed. "Would you like me to be your papa officially?" Eli's enthusiastic hug answered the question without words. 3 strangers who had met beside a broken wagon had become a family forged by shared struggle and mutual devotion. The legal proceedings concluded with Drury filing adoption papers that made Eli his son-in-law as well as love. Judge Morrison signed the documents with satisfaction that justice had prevailed over corruption. 1 year later, the Calder Ranch had become the most successful operation in the territory. Ophelia's financial expertise, working through Drury's legal authority, had created prosperity that benefited the entire community. She operated the territory's first consulting business for struggling ranchers, helping families build sustainable operations that could resist future economic manipulation. Her reputation for honest dealing attracted clients from neighboring territories. Eli thrived in the stable environment that provided education, affection, and purpose. The frightened boy who had collapsed beside their broken wagon now helped manage cattle operations with confident competence. Their dinner table conversations mixed business planning with family affection that filled the modest house with warmth. The leather satchel displayed on the mantelpiece served as a reminder of their journey from desperation to prosperity. Ophelia often reflected on the moment when stale bread shared by a stranger had changed their lives forever. Trust offered in desperate circumstances had grown into love that transformed not just 3 lives, but an entire community. The wooden sign above their gate proclaimed Calder Family Ranch to visitors who came seeking the wisdom that had restored stolen dreams and created lasting prosperity from frontier justice.